Emma hadn't touched aircraft controls in 3 years. Not since the crash. Not since Sarah died. She'd sworn never to fly again. But when both pilots collapsed at 32,000 feet and 189 passengers faced certain death, the quiet girl in seat 14A had one choice: reveal her secret or let everyone die. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The coffee in Emma's hand trembled as she walked through Gate 7 at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. She kept her eyes down, counting her steps: 1, 2, 3, 4, a habit she'd developed 3 years ago after the accident. The airport buzzed with Tuesday morning chaos, businessmen shouting into phones, families dragging oversized luggage, announcement speakers crackling overhead. Emma wanted to disappear into the noise. She wore faded jeans, a gray hoodie pulled tight, and carried only a small backpack. Her brown hair hung loose, partially hiding her face. At 26, she looked younger, almost fragile. People bumped past her without apology. She was invisible, exactly how she wanted it. Emma found seat 14A by the window and slid in quickly. The Boeing 757 would carry 189 passengers to Seattle today. She pressed her forehead against the cool window glass and closed her eyes. Flying used to thrill her. Now it filled her with dread and something darker, guilt that sat heavy in her chest like a stone. "Excuse me, coming through." A large man in a business suit squeezed into seat 14B beside her. He smelled of expensive cologne and coffee. He didn't look at Emma, just opened his laptop immediately and started typing aggressively. His elbow invaded her armrest space. Across the aisle in 14C sat a young woman, maybe 22, with bright pink hair and headphones. She was reading a thick medical textbook, occasionally highlighting passages. In 14D, an elderly man settled in with a newspaper, his hands shaking slightly as he unfolded it. Flight attendant Michelle moved down the aisle with practiced efficiency. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Sir, we'll need that laptop stowed before takeoff," she told the businessman pleasantly. "Just one more email," he grunted without looking up. Michelle's smile tightened but she moved on. She glanced at Emma, who had pulled her hood up and was staring out the window. "You okay, honey? First time flying?" Emma shook her head slightly. "I'm fine." Michelle studied her for a moment longer, then continued down the aisle. Emma felt exposed, seen. She hated it. What none of them knew, what Emma made sure nobody ever knew, was that she had 847 hours of logged flight time. She'd been 2 months away from her commercial pilot's license when it happened. When her best friend Sarah died in the crash. When Emma had been at the controls. The memory tried to surface and Emma shoved it down hard. She focused on the present. On staying invisible. On getting through this flight without anyone noticing her. In the cockpit, Captain Marcus Reed ran through pre-flight checks with his co-pilot, First Officer David Chen. Marcus was 58, a veteran pilot with silver hair and 32 years of experience. He'd flown through storms, mechanical failures, and one attempted hijacking in 1998. Nothing rattled him. Oil pressure good, fuel flow normal, navigation systems online, David called out, checking his instruments. David was 31, competent but still relatively new to commercial aviation. He'd only been flying 757s for 18 months. "Weather looks clear all the way to Seattle," Marcus said, adjusting his headset. "Should be a smooth ride. Let's give these folks a boring flight." "The best kind," David agreed with a smile. But Marcus felt off this morning. His chest felt tight. Probably just the breakfast burrito from the airport food court. He'd flown with worse heartburn. He rolled his shoulders and focused on the checklist. At 8:47 a.m., Flight 332 pushed back from the gate. Emma watched the ground crew through her window, seeing the precise choreography of tugs, fuel trucks, and baggage carts. She knew every step of the process. Could probably do half their jobs herself if asked. The thought made her chest ache. The businessman beside her was still typing frantically, ignoring the announcement to stow electronics. Michelle walked by again. "Sir, that needs to be put away now." Yeah, 1 second, he muttered. Michelle's jaw tightened. "Sir, it's a federal regulation. Not a suggestion." He huffed dramatically and slammed the laptop closed, making Emma flinch. "Unbelievable," he muttered loudly. 20 years of flying and they still treat you like children." The plane taxied toward runway 28R. Emma felt her pulse quicken. Her palms grew sweaty. The roar of engines spooling up made her stomach drop. She gripped the armrest until her knuckles turned white. "Chicago Tower, Flight 332 ready for departure," Marcus radioed. "Flight 332, cleared for takeoff runway 28R. Winds 270 at 12 knots. Cleared for takeoff, 28R, Flight 332. The 757 accelerated down the runway. Emma closed her eyes, feeling every vibration, hearing every system working. At 157 knots, the nose lifted. The main gear left the ground at 163 knots. She knew these numbers without thinking. They were burned into her memory along with everything else she'd tried to forget. The plane climbed steeply through 10,000 feet. Emma opened her eyes and looked out at Chicago shrinking below. The businessman was already back on his laptop despite the seatbelt sign still being illuminated. The pink-haired student was asleep, medical textbook open on her lap. The elderly man stared straight ahead, breathing carefully. At 32,000 feet, the plane leveled off. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Michelle and another flight attendant began preparing the beverage cart. Emma pulled out her phone and put in earbuds, but didn't play anything. She just needed people to think she was occupied. Unavailable. She stared out at the clouds below, brilliant white in the morning sun. In the cockpit, Marcus suddenly felt worse. The tightness in his chest had become pressure, then pain. He shifted in his seat, trying to ease it. Probably just muscle strain. He'd been working out more lately, maybe pulled something. "You okay, Captain?" David glanced over. "Fine. Just a little indigestion." But it wasn't fine. The pain was spreading to his left arm now. Marcus knew what that meant. He'd taken enough medical training to recognize the signs, but his mind rejected it. Not now. Not at 32,000 feet with 189 souls on board. "David," he said quietly. "I think." The pain exploded across his chest like a steel band tightening. Marcus gasped, clutching at his shirt. His vision blurred. He couldn't breathe. "Captain." David's voice shot up an octave. "Marcus." Marcus slumped forward against his harness, unconscious. The control yoke tilted slightly under his weight, and the plane began a shallow descent. David's hands flew across the console, disengaging Marcus's controls and taking full command. His training kicked in through the panic. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Chicago Center, this is Flight 332. We have a medical emergency. Captain is unconscious. Requesting immediate diversion to nearest suitable airport. Flight 332, Chicago Center, copy your Mayday. Say nature of emergency and souls on board. Chicago Center, Flight 332. Captain appears to be having a heart attack. I have 189 souls on board plus crew. I'm declaring an emergency. Request vectors to O'Hare for immediate landing. Flight 332, Roger. Turn left heading 080. Descend and maintain 15,000. Medical is being alerted. In the cabin, passengers started noticing something was wrong. The plane's attitude had changed. Michelle dropped the beverage cart and rushed toward the cockpit. She knocked urgently. Guys, everything okay? David's voice came through the door, tight with stress. Captain is down. Heart attack. Get the medical kit and find a doctor. Now. Michelle's face went pale. Is there a doctor on board? She called out, trying to keep her voice steady. We have a medical emergency. If you're a physician or have medical training, please ring your call button immediately. The cabin erupted. People started talking at once, voices rising. Emma heard the word emergency and felt ice flood her veins. What's happening? The businessman demanded. Why did she say emergency? The pink-haired student was awake now, looking around confused. The elderly man had gone even paler, breathing hard. Michelle returned with the medical kit just as a woman in her 30s rushed forward from row 22. I'm Dr. Patel. Cardiologist. Cockpit, Michelle said, punching in the access code. They disappeared through the door. Emma's heart hammered. She could hear David's voice over the radio, stressed but controlled. She'd heard that tone before, a pilot barely holding it together. The plane was descending more steeply now. Something was very wrong. Inside the cockpit, Dr. Patel was checking Marcus's pulse and breathing. He's in cardiac arrest. I need to start CPR. Can you get him out of this seat? Not while flying, David said through gritted teeth. His hands were shaking on the controls. I can't fly and move him. The cockpit's too small. Then I'll work around him, Dr. Patel said, already starting chest compressions at an awkward angle. David focused on flying, but panic was creeping in. He'd never flown a 757 solo in an emergency. His hands were slippery with sweat. The plane felt heavy, sluggish. Or maybe that was just his imagination. He couldn't tell anymore. Flight 332, you're cleared direct O'Hare, runway 28R. Emergency equipment is standing by. How are you doing up there? Chicago Center, I'm okay. Captain is still unconscious. I'm maintaining control but... David's voice cracked. I've never done a single pilot landing in a 757. You've got this, 332. We're with you all the way. Just take it step by step. But David's breathing was coming too fast. His vision was starting to tunnel. The instrument panel seemed to swim in front of him. Too many gauges. Too much information. He couldn't process it all. I can't, he gasped. There's too much. Flight 332, slow your breathing. You're hyperventilating. But David couldn't hear any more. The panic had him completely. His chest felt like it was being crushed. He couldn't get enough air. The cockpit was spinning. Dr. Patel looked up from her compressions on Marcus. He's going into shock. Michelle, I need that AED and I need help with this pilot too. Michelle stood frozen in the doorway, eyes wide with terror. Both pilots down. No one to fly the plane. Help. Michelle's scream carried into the cabin. Is anyone a pilot? We need a pilot now. The cabin erupted into chaos. People started crying, shouting. A child began screaming. The businessman grabbed Michelle's arm as she emerged from the cockpit. What's happening? Who's flying the plane? Both pilots are down, Michelle said, her voice breaking. Autopilot is on but we need someone who can land this plane. Does anyone have any flight experience? Emma felt like she was underwater. Sounds became muffled and distant. She saw Michelle's mouth moving, saw the panic spreading like wildfire through the cabin, but she couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Not again. Please not again. The memory crashed through her defenses, Sarah laughing in the right seat of the Cessna 172. Emma at the controls, flying through what looked like light clouds. Then suddenly they were in solid IMC, instrument meteorological conditions, and Emma's training evaporated in panic. She'd frozen. Lost situational awareness. By the time she recovered, they'd descended too far, too fast. The trees came out of nowhere. Sarah died on impact. Emma walked away with a broken arm and shattered soul. Please. Michelle was crying now. Someone must know how to fly. Emma's hands trembled violently. She felt like she might vomit. But through the panic, she heard her old flight instructor's voice, crusty old Tom with his military bearing and zero tolerance for excuses. Emma, when everything goes to hell, that's when real pilots shine. You don't have the luxury of fear. People are counting on you. She stood up on shaking legs. I have flight training, Emma said quietly. Nobody heard her. The cabin was too loud with panic. I have flight training. Emma shouted, her voice cracking. Every head turned toward her. Michelle rushed over, grabbing Emma's arm. You can fly. Seriously? I have 847 logged hours. I was training for my commercial license but I haven't flown in 3 years. The businessmen scoffed. 3 years? You're going to kill us all. She's just a kid. I'm 26, Emma said, but her voice was so quiet it barely carried. Michelle looked desperately between Emma and the cockpit. You're all we have. Please. Please try. Emma felt her legs moving, carrying her forward even though every instinct screamed to run the other way. She stepped into the cockpit and her breath caught. The instrument panel glowed with dozens of displays, so much more complex than the Cessna she'd trained in. David was slumped in the right seat, breathing too fast, eyes unfocused. Dr. Patel was still doing compressions on Captain Marcus. I need room to work, Emma said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Can you move the captain to the cabin? Not until I stabilize him, Dr. Patel panted. His heart stopped. If I stop compressions, he dies. Emma slid into the left seat, her hands hovering over the controls. The yoke felt familiar and foreign at once. The throttles were where she expected. But there were so many switches, buttons, screens. The 757 was a different universe from a single-engine trainer. Chicago Center, this is a passenger on Flight 332. Emma's voice shook as she keyed the radio. Both pilots are incapacitated. I have flight training but I've never flown anything this large. I need help. The radio was silent for 3 long seconds. Then, Flight 332, say again. Did you say a passenger is now at the controls? Yes. My name is Emma Lawson. I have 847 hours total time, mostly in single-engine aircraft. I was training for my commercial license but didn't complete it. I know basic instruments and VFR flight. I need someone to talk me through this. Another pause. Emma could imagine the chaos in the control tower. Then a new voice came through, calm and authoritative. Emma, this is Captain Mike Torres. I'm a Czech airman and flight instructor. I've been flying 757s for 20 years. I'm going to be your co-pilot from the ground. You're going to do exactly what I say, when I say it. Can you do that? I'll try. Don't try. Do. First thing, what's your current altitude and heading? Emma scanned the instruments, forcing herself to focus. Altitude is 14,200 feet and descending. Heading 082. Airspeed 287 knots. Good. You're reading the instruments correctly. Now, do you see the autopilot panel? It's in the center, above the throttles. Emma found it, her eyes tracing the buttons and switches. Yes. I see it. The autopilot is engaged, which is keeping you flying straight. But we need to level off this descent. See the altitude selector? The digital window that shows an altitude? Yes. It's set to 10,000. Change it to 14,000. Turn the knob next to it. Emma's hand shook as she reached for the knob. She turned it and watched the numbers change, 11,000. 12,000, 14,000. Okay, it's set to 14,000. Perfect. The autopilot will level you off. Now take a breath. You're doing great. Behind her, Michelle had recruited 2 male passengers to help carry Captain Marcus to the cabin where Dr. Patel could work on him properly. They struggled with his weight in the cramped space. David was being helped to a seat, still hyperventilating but conscious. Emma was alone in the cockpit now. Just her and the machines and the voice on the radio. Emma, I need you to tell me your training background, Captain Torres said. How much time do you have in complex aircraft? None. Just basic trainers. Cessna 172 mostly. About 40 hours in a Piper Arrow. Okay. Have you ever used autopilot before? Yes. Basic autopilot in the Arrow. Good. This is more sophisticated but the principles are the same. The airplane wants to fly, Emma. Your job is just to manage it. Now, we need to get you back to O'Hare and on the ground. The weather is clear, winds are light. This is the best-case scenario for an emergency landing. I've never landed anything this big, Emma whispered. You've landed aircraft before. This is bigger and faster, but it's the same fundamentals. You can do this. But I need you to believe you can do this. Can you? Emma thought of Sarah. Of the guilt she'd carried for 3 years. Of all the nights she'd lain awake wondering if she'd ever deserve to fly again. I can do it, she said. In the cabin, word had spread. The quiet girl from 14A was flying the plane. Reactions varied wildly. The businessman was convinced they were all going to die and said so loudly and repeatedly. The pink-haired student, her name was Jenna, was surprisingly calm, reassuring people around her. The elderly man, whose name was Arthur, had served in the Air Force decades ago. He moved through the cabin keeping people seated and quiet. Let the girl concentrate, Arthur said firmly. Fighting and panic won't help anyone. She's our best chance. Let her work. Michelle returned to the cockpit doorway. How are you doing? Terrified, Emma admitted. But I'm managing. That captain on the radio? He sounds confident in you. He's probably just trying to keep me calm. Maybe. But you haven't crashed yet. That's something. Emma almost smiled. The bar is pretty low. Captain Torres's voice came through again. Emma, I'm going to have you start a gentle turn back toward O'Hare. You're currently heading away from the airport. Are you comfortable making turns? Yes. I've done plenty of turns. Great. This will be very similar. I want you to turn right to heading 260. Use the heading selector on the autopilot panel. Find the HDG button. Emma found it. Yes. Good. Turn the selector until it reads 260. Emma turned the knob. The heading indicator rotated and the plane began a smooth bank to the right. She felt the aircraft respond and a tiny spark of confidence flickered in her chest. She was doing it. Actually controlling this massive machine. Beautiful turn, Emma. Nice and smooth. You're a natural. Don't patronize me, Emma said. I need honest feedback. How am I really doing? Captain Torres laughed. Honestly? Better than some of my students who've been training for months. You're keeping your composure, reading instruments correctly, following instructions precisely. That's 90% of flying right there. The plane rolled out on heading 260. Emma was starting to see the instrument panel differently now, not as an overwhelming wall of data but as organized information streams. Altitude, airspeed, heading, fuel, engine performance, Each gauge told her a specific story. Emma, we're going to start vectoring you for the approach to runway 28R. That's the same runway you departed from. You're going to fly a wide pattern and intercept the approach from the east. I'll guide you every step. How's your fuel? Emma checked the fuel gauges. Showing 18,400 pounds remaining. Perfect. That's about 90 minutes of fuel, more than enough. How are you feeling? Hands steady. Emma looked at her hands on the yoke. They were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I'm okay. Better than I was. Outstanding. Now let's talk about the approach. Have you ever done an instrument approach? Yes. I had about 30 hours of instrument training. I can fly ILS approaches. Even better. Runway 28R has a full ILS system. The autopilot can fly most of the approach for you. I'll tell you when to take over manually. Over the next 20 minutes, Captain Torres vectored Emma through a series of turns, descending gradually. She changed headings, adjusted altitudes, extended the landing gear when instructed. Each task felt monumental, but she completed them one at a time, focusing only on the immediate instruction. In the cabin, Dr. Patel had managed to get Captain Marcus's heart beating again. He was unconscious but stable, breathing on his own. David had recovered enough to explain to passengers that Emma was doing remarkably well, that they had an expert talking her through everything. She's going to get us down, David said, his voice still shaky but sincere. She's doing better than I would have in my first year. The businessman, his name was Gerald, had finally stopped complaining and sat white-knuckled in his seat. Jenna, the medical student, was explaining to nearby passengers what was happening medically with the pilots. Arthur was helping Michelle keep children calm by telling stories about his Air Force days. I flew cargo planes in Vietnam, he said to a terrified 10-year-old boy. And let me tell you, that young lady up there has something special. She's got the calm. The focus. She's going to be just fine. Emma heard none of this. She was locked in complete concentration, every sense focused on Captain Torres's instructions and the instrument panel in front of her. Emma, you're now 15 miles from the airport. I want you to reduce speed to 210 knots. Pull back the throttles slowly until the speed indicator shows 210. Emma's hand found the throttles, for long levers in the center console. She pulled them back gently. The engine noise decreased and the speed began dropping, 260. 240, 220. 210. Perfect. Now, see the flap lever on your right? It's a long handle near the center console. I see it. Set flaps to 5 degrees. Just move the lever to the first notch. Emma moved the lever. She heard machinery whining as the wing flaps extended slightly. The plane shuddered momentarily, then settled. How does she feel? Captain Torres asked. Different. Slower, more stable. That's exactly right. The flaps increase lift at lower speeds. You're going to deploy them progressively as you slow down for landing. Now, you should see the runway straight ahead, about 12 miles. Can you see it? Emma looked through the windscreen. There, a thin line in the distance. O'Hare Airport. I see it. Good. The autopilot is going to intercept the ILS beam, which is like a radio guide path to the runway. It'll fly you right down to about 200 feet above the ground. Then you'll take over manually for the actual landing. Ready? No, Emma said honestly. But let's do it anyway. That's the right attitude. Reducing altitude to 3,000 feet. Set your altitude selector. Emma made the adjustment. The plane began a steady descent. The runway was getting closer, more defined. She could see other aircraft on the ground, emergency vehicles with flashing lights lining the runway. Emma, I need you to extend full landing gear now. There's a gear lever near the flap lever. It has a wheel shape on it. Emma found it. Got it. Pull it down. She pulled the lever. Deep mechanical sounds rumbled through the aircraft. Red lights flashed on the instrument panel, then turned green one by one. 3 green lights? Captain Torres asked. Yes. 3 green. Landing gear down and locked. You're doing fantastic. Speed 180 knots. Set flaps to 15. Emma moved the flap lever again. The plane slowed further, nose pitching up slightly. The runway was clearly visible now, growing larger. Flaps 15 set. Good. Speed 160. Final flaps, set to 30. Emma deployed full flaps. The plane felt completely different now, slow, nose high, but stable. Like it was suspended on wires. Speed 140 knots. You're on the ILS glide slope. Height 1,000 feet. Looking perfect, Emma. Her hands found the yoke. She could feel the aircraft through it now, every vibration, every tiny adjustment. She'd forgotten this feeling. The connection between pilot and machine. How flying wasn't just operating equipment but becoming part of it. 600 feet. Speed 135. Little slow, add a touch of power. Emma pushed the throttles forward slightly. The engines responded immediately. Perfect. 400 feet. Emma, I need you to disengage autopilot and take manual control. Press the disconnect button on the yoke. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading. Emma found the button and pressed it. The autopilot disconnected with a click she felt through her whole body. The yoke came alive in her hands. She was flying. The runway filled the windscreen. Emma could see every marking, every light. 300 feet. The plane wanted to sink. She added a touch of back pressure on the yoke. 200 feet. Reduce power slightly. 100 feet. You're high on speed, Emma. Pull power back more. Emma pulled the throttles back. The runway rushed up to meet them. 50 feet. 40 feet. She eased the yoke back, flaring, trying to grease it on. 30 feet. 20 feet. The main landing gear kissed the runway with barely a bump. Emma held the nose up, letting the plane slow. Then the nose gear touched down. She was on the ground. Thrust reversers, Emma. Pull the throttle levers up and back. Emma found the thrust reverser levers and yanked them back. The engines roared, pushing against their forward momentum. The plane decelerated rapidly. She found the brake pedals with her feet and pressed gently. The 757 slowed to a walking pace. Emma turned onto a taxiway as instructed and brought the plane to a complete stop. She sat there, hands still on the yoke, unable to move. Emma. Captain Torres's voice was thick with emotion. Emma, you did it. That was a textbook landing. You saved 189 lives today. The cockpit door burst open. Michelle rushed in and threw her arms around Emma, sobbing. Then Jenna was there, and Dr. Patel, and Arthur. The cabin behind them erupted in cheers and applause. Gerald the businessman appeared in the doorway, his face red. I'm sorry. For doubting you. For everything I said. You're a hero. Emma couldn't speak. Couldn't process what had just happened. She'd flown again. After 3 years of guilt and fear and hiding, she'd flown again. And nobody had died. Emergency crews swarmed the aircraft. Paramedics took Captain Marcus and David away on stretchers. Passengers deplaned, many stopping to hug Emma or thank her through tears. News cameras were everywhere. Captain Torres met her at the gate. He was a stocky Hispanic man in his 50s with kind eyes. Emma Lawson, he said, shaking her hand. I've been instructing pilots for 25 years. What you did today was extraordinary. Why did you quit flying? Emma felt the tears finally come. I crashed 3 years ago. My friend died. It was my fault. I froze in bad weather and lost control. Sarah died and I lived and I couldn't fly after that. Couldn't face it. Captain Torres didn't let go of her hand. Emma, I don't know what happened that day. But I know what happened today. You faced your fear. You saved all those people. That takes more courage than anything. I was terrified. Of course you were. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. You did that. He paused. The industry needs pilots like you. Have you ever thought about finishing your license? Emma shook her head. I can't. Not after what happened. Can't. Or won't. Because today proved you absolutely can. The next few days were a blur. Emma's story made headlines worldwide. Passenger turned hero and Quiet Girl Saves Flight appeared in newspapers everywhere. She was offered interviews, talk show appearances, book deals. She declined them all. But something had shifted inside her. The guilt hadn't disappeared, it probably never would, but it had loosened its grip. She'd proven to herself that she could fly without killing someone. That her training and instincts were sound. That Sarah's death, while tragic, didn't mean Emma was destined to cause tragedy. 3 weeks later, Emma walked into Midwest Flight Academy. Tom, her old instructor, looked up from his desk and his weathered face broke into a rare smile. Wondered when you'd show up, he said. Saw you on the news. Hell of a thing you did. I want to finish my license, Emma said. I want to fly again. Tom nodded slowly. You scared? Terrified. Good. Means you're taking it seriously. He pulled out her old training file. You've got about 200 hours to complete for your commercial license. Plus you'll need some recertification since you've been out so long. You ready to work? Yes. Over the next 8 months, Emma threw herself into training. Every flight was difficult. Every takeoff brought memories of the crash. But she pushed through, remembering the feeling of landing Flight 332 safely. Remembering that fear didn't have to be paralyzing. She still thought about Sarah every day. But now, instead of just guilt, she felt gratitude. Sarah had loved flying. Had encouraged Emma to pursue it even when Emma doubted herself. Sarah wouldn't have wanted Emma to give up flying forever. Emma completed her commercial license on a clear autumn morning. Tom signed off her final check ride with a satisfied grunt. You're a damn good pilot, Emma. Always were. Just needed to believe it. 6 months later, Emma accepted a position as a first officer with Regional Express Airlines. She still preferred to keep quiet, still felt most comfortable in the background. But she no longer hid her abilities or ran from her past. On her first day, she walked through the airport terminal in uniform, crisp white shirt with epaulets, black slacks, pilot's cap. People smiled and nodded respectfully. Children pointed excitedly. Emma kept her head up, making eye contact, letting herself be seen. She carried a photo of Sarah in her flight bag, tucked next to her pilot's license. Before every flight, she touched it once. This one's for you, she'd whisper. Today, Emma has logged over 2,000 flight hours. She's known among her colleagues as calm under pressure, methodical, and patient with nervous passengers. She regularly visits flight schools to talk to student pilots about managing fear and trusting their training. Being a pilot isn't about being fearless, she tells them. It's about being competent despite your fear. It's about training so thoroughly that your hands know what to do even when your mind is screaming. And it's about showing up even when it would be easier to hide. The story of Flight 332 became legendary in aviation circles. But for Emma, it was more than just a dramatic rescue. It was the day she stopped being the quiet girl in seat 14A and became herself again, a pilot, a leader, someone who stepped forward when others couldn't. She still thinks about that morning, Michelle's terrified voice, Captain Torres's calm instructions, the weight of the yoke in her hands. She remembers the fear. But more importantly, she remembers that she didn't let the fear stop her. Sometimes the most important journey isn't the one that takes you somewhere new. Sometimes it's the one that brings you back to where you belong. For Emma, Flight 332 was that journey, from seat 14A back to the cockpit, from hiding to healing, from guilt to grace. And every time she straps into a pilot's seat now, every time she pushes the throttles forward for takeoff, she knows Sarah would be proud. Not because Emma became a hero, but because she found the courage to fly again.